Welcome, everyone. My name is Paige Arthur. I'm the Deputy Director at the Center on International Cooperation at NYU. And as people are continuing to join, I'm just going to say a few words of welcome to everyone. This is the first of two workshops within the workshop. And we're going to use this session and the next one to imagine together a future for data services and for capacity building for data-driven approaches in the prevention and peace-building field. And the idea for this partly comes from a report that we published last year, our Data for Peacebuilding and Prevention Ecosystem Map, or mapping, that was written by Branka Panic, who's also here today. And in the report, we note that our field lags behind other sectors like the humanitarian sector, the development sector, in using data to drive greater innovation and impact. It also lacks a community of practice across sectors, government, multilateral, private sector, civil society, research, which is really needed to support innovative partnership. And in addition, the use of data and technology for peace building and prevention comes with a lot of challenges, not specific to our field, but certainly very, very well within our field. So lack of quality data, fragmented efforts, lack of capacity to use data, and many ethical questions still to be settled. So to address these challenges, we recommended a few steps to strengthen community of practice on data-driven approaches across sectors. And these international convenings are part of that community of practice strengthening. But importantly, we also recommended that there should be a scoping of options for a data and technology hub that could consolidate relevant data and provide expert resources for field level initiatives. And we felt that a data hub for prevention and peace building would have the potential to really centralize information, foster innovation, and enable partnerships, which would lead to more evidence-based strategies and practices. And this could also be a resource for building capacities on data-driven approaches, including data literacy, protection standards, methods and tools, ethical issues, and so on. So it turns out that we were not the only ones with this idea, and I hope that suggests that it's actually a pretty good idea. So our colleagues over at the UN, in particular, Christina Goodness, who's here today, and others were already starting to put together an early prototype for an information hub, which they then launched in October this year. So I think these kinds of efforts are incredibly timely for a number of reasons. But going back to some of my comments from yesterday, the issue of rising and compounding risks resulting from the COVID-19 pandemic or from climate change, this requires complex analysis and insights, and it just seems obvious that we should consider the benefits of consolidating access to relevant data sets so that experts can then be as creative as possible in developing models and also in solutions. So shortly, I'm going to hand over to our two experts, Christina Goodness from the UN Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs, Department of Peace Operations, and Javier Turan from the OCHA Center for Humanitarian Data to share lessons learned on their experience so far. But since we want this to be as interactive as possible, and I know we're not together in person, so this is difficult, but we'd like to, I'd like to ask Branka to lead us through a quick exercise using a virtual whiteboard. It's a bit of a getting to know you exercise. So if we were all together in the same room physically, we could do some quick introductions. So this is a substitute for that. So I'm going to hand over to Branka now to lead us through that. Branka.
Thank you, Paige, and welcome everybody again. Good morning or good afternoon, good evening, wherever you're joining us from. As Paige said, we wanted somehow to bring this experience as closer as possible to in-person gatherings, and we know that humanitarians and peace builders like post-it notes and like sharing ideas on whiteboards and post-it notes. So we wanted to start with the Mirror, which is basically a whiteboard. I just put a link in the chat. And I'm intentionally not sharing my screen because I would like you to actually go directly to the link. And to look at the whiteboard. I see so many names appearing already, which is great. So we are starting with this icebreaker where we are actually inviting you to share with us what brings you here. And you can share either directly what work you are doing or how your work is related to data-driven approaches in humanitarian or peace-building work. You can put on the board the questions that you want to bring to this discussion. And in case you're new to Mirrorboard, I just wanted quickly to give a sort of a tip how to find your way through this. I posted a bunch of empty post-it I see people are already using, which is amazing. You can also look at the left side of your screen where you can pick one of them. You see probably me now picking one of the sticky notes and putting it on the board, and exactly, so you can just add the empty notes out there and start adding a little bit about why you are here, what motivates you to join our workshop today. So hopefully this will break the ice, but also prepare us a little bit to continue using the board in the second part of this workshop after we hear introductions from Javier and Cristina. We will continue in breakout rooms and continue using the board. So for now, keep using the upper, exactly how you are doing it now, the upper box and putting your notes out there. With technical moderator, we agree that we will have 5 to 7 minutes to do this. Feel free to put more. You're not limited only to one post-it. And then we will, after 5 minutes of putting the post-its, we will actually break into one-on-ones in the Zoom. So you can meet directly one of the colleagues who joined the workshop, share what you put on the board on one-on-one. So I'll stop now and I'll also put my own notes. I'm inviting our speakers and breakout moderators to join the board and put what brings them there as well. And then I will quickly read some of them and ask technical moderator maybe to give us a sign before we go into one-on-one breakouts. Thank you. I can also read some of them immediately, so I break the silence a bit. So I see people are putting that they want to build a data community. I'm developing my research on conflict prevention over water. I worked as a digitalizing and development specialist in international NGO works on peace building called Peace Geeks. We know Peace Geeks. Welcome to the workshop. This workshop overlaps with the core of my work. This is exactly why we are so excited about this workshop, because we know that there is a lot of overlapping work as well. As Paige said, there are a lot of synergies here, so that makes us exciting to see what will come out in the second part of the workshop. Feel free to use post-its. I think we are right on time. We have a lot of content already on the board. So I suggest to technical moderator, feel free to break us into one-on-one rooms now for not more than 3 minutes, because we are really eager to hear Javier and Cristina and what they have to share with us.
Sure. I will open all the rooms now.
Thank you, Marian.
Please feel free to join the room that you've been assigned to.
I got stuck in room 14 by myself.
Hi, Gary. How are you?
Hey, Patrick. Good. Good to see you.
I had similarly time for introspection by myself in the breakout room.
They told us we need a room to ourselves. You just go in the corner and think.
Yeah, exactly.
Sorry, it's possible that the other participant dropped out or had connection issues. I can assign the two of you to another room if you would like. We also have Alexander and Madhavan. I can assign you all to a room. It sort of seems like that is the scenario. If you'd like to rejoin room 11, Patrick, I can assign Gary to the same room.
If I can figure out, oh yeah, I see join breakout room. Sure, I can go to breakout room 11. So
Gary, do you remember which room you were in?
I was in 14, but
Okay.
nobody else showed up.
I'm moving you to 11.
Thank you.
For the others who are in the room, are you experiencing the same issues? Would you like to be assigned to a room that does have participants? Oh, it does seem that we are about done with the breakout room time. Apologies for that. That is the danger of having participants who do drop out. We are about to close the breakout rooms, so please stay in the main room and I will bring everyone else here.
Hi, welcome back, everybody. That was great. I just met Vaisali from the World Food Program in Rome, who's working on conflict sensitivity. So that was interesting. I hope that you were able to have a good chat. So then now let's turn to our expert discussants today. So we're going to learn the lessons. Very excited for this of the Humanitarian Data Center. And also of the efforts that Christina Gunas has been leading over at DPO. So let me hand over to Javier first to talk about the Center for Humanitarian Data and their approach to consolidating data services and lessons that they've learned. So Javier, you have about 10-15 minutes, and then we'll go over to Christina after you.
Excellent. Thank you, Paige. And hi, everyone. I'm going to share my screen. I think it would be nice to put some slides just to guide the discussion. If you could confirm, you can see, let me just put it in presenting mode. If you can just confirm, you can see my screen.
Yes, we see.
Excellent. Okay, so thank you, everyone. Thank you for the invitation. It's really a pleasure to be here with all of you, and also to share the workshop with Christina, who is a great partner of the Center for Humanitarian Data and has been working with us since the beginning of XDX. So what I'm going to use my time here is to share some of the lessons that we have been learning by building XDX. I'm going to share also the type of data that you can find on the platform and some of the key insights that we have learned on this journey. So maybe I should start just by defining what is the Humanitarian Data Exchange. So the Humanitarian Data Exchange is an open platform for sharing data across humanitarian organizations. So launched in July 2014 by the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs. The goal of XDX is to make data easy to find and use for analysis. Today, there are approximately 18,000 different data sets on XDX covering every active crisis from Afghanistan to Yemen. Maybe before, well, this is just a snapshot of our landing page of XDX that you can easily find by just typing in Google Humanitarian Data Exchange, or just going to homedata.org, and you will find our platform. But maybe before starting and sharing some of the experience that we had building XDX since July 2014, maybe it's worth giving just a step back and put you in our sector. So as you probably know, OCHA has a very unique and important role on information management. So while many UN organizations and NGOs, they have a sector-specific focus on collecting data, like for instance, IOM, they collect data about displacement, or UNHCR, they collect data on refugees. OCHA is tasked to bring together all these data sets to build a common operational picture of a humanitarian crisis. So our task is really to aggregate all these different data sets. So back before XDX ever existed, we were thinking, how can we put all this humanitarian data together? And we realized, and at that time, we realized that even finding humanitarian data was very difficult. And once the data was found, we realized that it was very difficult to trust that data set. We couldn't say, is this the latest data set? What is the source of this data set? What is the methodology that was used to collect this data set? In addition, before XDX, the way data was shared was basically based on personal connections. So if you knew the person in Afghanistan, that you knew that he or she will be handling the boundaries of the provinces in Afghanistan, you will send him an email or send her an email and say, hey, can you share the boundaries of Afghanistan? And this person will share that back to you. But in our sector, and I'm sure will be the same story in other sectors, the turnover is huge. So after 2 years or maybe 1 year, that person that knew where the boundaries were available is gone. He moved to another crisis, or she moved to another response, and then your contact is gone. So you couldn't really keep that knowledge, keep that data set. So, so what we try to do with XDX is that to create one place where you can find the data, you can see what is the source, you can really rely on the information, on the metadata behind the data set, and you can reuse it. So before moving further, let me just explain what we mean with humanitarian data. And this definition is really based on a lot of research that the Center for Humanitarian Data has been doing to understand the needs of our community. What do they need? What they are really looking for? What is the format that is the more accessible for our community to use? So based on research, based on focus groups, based on a lot of surveys, we came up with this definition of humanitarian data. So for us, in our context, humanitarian data means all those data sets that they have to do with that describe the context of a crisis. So that means the boundaries of a country, the boundaries of the provinces, the boundaries of the districts, the population figures, the mortality rates, the roads network, where the health facilities are located, where the education facilities are located. So that constitutes one part of humanitarian data. The other component is data about the people that is affected by a crisis. So here we are thinking about data about IDPs, the refugees, the people affected by an earthquake, by a flood. Where are they? What are they profiling? What are their needs? All this information in a form of a data set is what constitutes also humanitarian data. And the last component of our definition is data about the humanitarian response. So what is, for instance, the 3W? That's a very famous and typical product from OCHA. Who is doing what where? What organizations are working on what? On which location? So that data also is part of our definition. So these are some of the examples that we have data sets on XDX that you can easily find on the platform. So mortality rates, food prices, food security, the boundaries, transportation network, care facilities, hospitals, primary care units, the DTMs from IOM, the IDP information, and so on. As I mentioned before, we started in 2014, but since then we have been growing very nicely. Thank you to the partnerships that we have been developed and all the effort that we have been putting on the platform. So these are some numbers just to give you a bit of context of where XDX stands. So last year, and I'm sharing the figure of 2020, these are the number of users that were visiting XDX. So a little more than 1.3 million users came to XDX looking for data. We got a bit of a bias last year, as many time series and as many series are also presented because of COVID-19. Many users came last year looking for cases and deaths and tests and vaccinations data to XDX. So we had a big increase, and I will share in a few slides also the trend. We have data for every single country in the world, but we are focusing more and more on those countries where there is a humanitarian response plan, or there is an interagency response plan as well. So we have at the moment a focus on 27 countries: Afghanistan, Somalia, Ethiopia, Sudan, South Sudan. I can share the complete list. There are approximately, no, actually there are exactly 296 active organizations sharing data on the platform. Many, I won't list all of them, and also with the fear of not listing some of the great partners, but you can find every single organization that's working the humanitarian sector on XDX, many of them. And one statistic that gives us like a very positive feeling is that in 2020, there were 2.2 million of downloads. So data sets that they were downloaded by these users that came to the platform. This is a little bit of a timeline of how we've been responding to very critical crises. since 2014. And the first one was the West Africa Ebola crisis in Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Guinea, where we were putting together the platform, engaging with WHO and partners in the field to make data available of Ebola. Then we also covered the Nepal earthquakes, and after the earthquake, we put together some data sets just to inform the community. And as this, we have been collecting data. This chart, you can read it like this: the green dots refers to the number of organizations that for that crisis were actively sharing data, whereas the size of the lollipop, if you want, means the number of the data sets that they were shared. So now during the COVID-19 pandemic, we have been very lucky to rely on the partnerships that we have been creating all along this time to keep sharing data related to the pandemic. This is the growth that we have been having in terms of number of organizations. So I would say that in average per year, we had about 20 to 25 organizations joining XDX. So at the beginning in 2014, there were only in July, 3-4 organizations that believe on this initiative. They were sharing data, but still they are partners and sharing information with us. And now we have changed a little bit the focus of this growth. Before we wanted more organizations that they contribute to data, but now we are more targeted. So we are looking now rather to the data sets that we are missing to cover those data gaps that exist. In terms of the number of data sets that have been shared on XDX, the same. We started with a handful of data sets, mostly from UN OCHA. It was one of the first contributors and great partners even today. And we have been growing in a nice manner. More and more, our partners are sharing data via an API, which means just in a programmatically way. So that means that we connect our computer to their computer, and whenever they have an updated data set, is reproduced on XDX. In terms of users, also the growth has been fantastic, with this caveat on 2020, where we had a lot of users coming looking for data about COVID, but we retain that visibility. So it's still on top of the million users per year. Our focus also is to get users coming from countries where there is an interagency response plan, and we have quite number of users. Also, let me say that our team is globally distributed, so we can also engage at the local level to work with partners so they can share data with more granularity in the places where we are. So we have a data hub in Dakar, in Senegal, another one in Nairobi, in Kenya. We have a colleague in Jakarta, in Indonesia. We have another colleague in Bangkok, Thailand. I'm based in Geneva, and I have another colleague in The Hague. So we try to be distributed so we can respond in an efficient way. Some of the key insights I want to share just for this group in case is of value is that we want to demonstrate the value of making data accessible. And I just want to bring an example that is back from 2014 at the beginning of the Ebola outbreak in West Africa. So in those days, in 2014, the Ebola cases were reported in the media. WHO was sharing data about those cases, the location, also the number of health workers with Ebola. But the data, surprisingly enough, were coming in the form of PDFs. So you will never find a PDF on XDX. The data that we have is in a machine readable format, CSV, Excel files, shape files, but never in a PDF. But at that time, the data was coming in a PDF, which it was nice. I mean, it's nice tables, but very hard to work with them. But the community was demanding that data. So what the team has done was to extract those tables from those documents and create just a simple table in Excel, put it on XDX, And you can't believe me, but it was an explosion of interest for that data. It was a big demand for that data. We put it on XDX, and journalists, media, a lot of people were accessing that data. And this is just a picture of the New York Times that they extract the data from XDX. They even connect via an API with us, and they were reproducing the cases and the deaths of the Ebola on that prestigious newspaper. Another key learning that I want to share with you is that relationships are super important. So just last year, and also as a response to the COVID-19 pandemic, we put together this dashboard that is called the COVID-19 XDX OCHA dashboard that puts together a little more than 25 different sources and more than 60 data sets to give you a complete view of the pandemic. So you will find here data from WHO about cases and deaths, also data about the COVAX program, the people in need for all the countries, whether it's a humanitarian response plan, the food security from IPC, the status of schools, whether they're closed, they're working remotely from UNESCO, food market prices from WFP. Is super nice and complete. I really invite you to take a look. And we couldn't put this together if we didn't have all the partnerships and relationships that we have been building in our community. This, of course, it takes time, and we maintain it on daily basis, but I cannot imagine just starting from scratch and build something like this. And I really invite you to take a look. The other thing is that we also, as my colleague used to say, we make the data dance. And one way is to really put narrative with data together. So the team has an amazing group of experts that they can put data story like this. And this is one of the latest one where we put data about real data. It's not fictitious data about a journey of a little girl looking for water in the Sahel. So combines facts with charts and tells you the story and provides narrative so you can understand and put in context all the different variables. So it's another aspect I invite you to take a look. And the last thing is that we promote a lot of data services. So one thing, of course, is in our interest to have data to share on XDX, but also we work very closely with our partners. So for instance, this is a data set that was shared on XDX just as an Excel table, but our team was able to put this in a form of a data visualization. So we understand in our community, people are very busy, they're running up and down, and sometimes they don't have time to open an Excel file, to create a pivot table, and to make analysis out of that. So we think that we can create efficiency by developing these data visualizations that people can just click and play around the database and learn a lot about the situation. So the other thing is that I think we have been creating a lot of efficiency in the sector, but still we realize that there are a lot of data gaps. So, and that was very much evident during the COVID-19 pandemic, where people were looking not only at the cases and deaths and vaccinations campaigns, but also some more strategic data set, like the comorbidities in a country, the cases and deaths, but at the subnational level. So we wanted to create awareness of the data that exists on XDX, but also of the data that is missing. And that's why we have created something that internally we call the XDX data grids. So data grids is just a way to put together the most important data related to a crisis, so our users can realize immediately what data is available, what data is missing, and create awareness of that. So we care about the quality of what is on the data grids. So a data set to be part of the data grid has to be subnational, has to be up to date, and it has to be in a machine readable format. So good data sets, good completeness that we have in certain areas like IDPs, refugees, food prices, and so on, but critical gaps that exist in our sector related to the location of health facilities, for instance, or the availability of the global acute malnutrition in some countries. So I invite you to take a look on XDX of what we have, what is missing, and interact with us. So I think with this, I leave just my contact details and looking forward for the discussion.
Thanks, Javier. This is really brilliant and I think inspiring. There are a number of positive messages in the chat, and I see at least one question as well for you. So maybe you could take a look at that while we hand over to Christina. So now I'm pleased to invite Christina Goodness from the Department of Political and Peacebuilding Affairs and Department of Peace Operations to talk about their efforts to develop a hub over the past year and also some future projects. So I think this will be a very interesting way of seeing, the future where one could go with this kind of initiative, but also the progress that's been made so far by Christina and her team. So Christina, over to you.
Okay, great. I hope everybody can hear me. I'm also going to try to share my screen now. Okay, and switch to a bit of a presentation on the Peace and Security Data Hub concept, the idea and the thing that actually has emerged from that concept. So really grateful for everybody's participation today, really grateful for the opportunity to connect, and we're really happy to meet a few people in the little breakout groups. Look forward to the rest of the day. I wanted to take the time to explain a little bit of the background of where we are with what you might call a prototype or a first attempt at a peace and security data hub hosted by the UN, but conceptually meant to build towards something that can operate a little bit more like a dialogue space, connecting internal and external to some critical data sets that allow us to understand our work, just in broad terms. Connecting the dots for peace, and there's the QR code if you want to point your phone towards it. Okay, so it's a place where the public can discover peace and security data sets and internal staff can exchange. And you could see us, our project, very much actually, like Javier had mentioned, attempting to draw from the lessons of, I think, especially HDX, but other agencies, funds and programs, and external partners as well. NYU CIC has been super helpful in making sure that we stay connected to the academic world, the NGOs, et cetera, civil society. And we've attempted to really draw on the feedback and input going forward to put together this prototype, which is at psdata.un.org, and also to develop it into the next phases, which we're very grateful to get a good amount of member state support to be able to do. So two phases to it. One is external, so that the peace and security pillar, notoriously opaque component of the UN, can become, put its money where its mouth is and become more transparent on a regular basis in a consistent way, drawing on all of the dialogues that we have as with partners and member states in an evidentiary fashion, like have a home base for the evidence, let's say. Another purpose is really to encourage internal exchange. There's the exchange dynamics internally in the UN can be incredibly and unnecessarily complex. And what we are attempting is to build an open marketplace with a few closed doors for more secure exchange, so that staff, even between us and OCHA, or between UNICEF and the peace and security pillar, can become easier. So really two main purposes: a dialogue and building towards a kind of common understanding of the measurables that govern peacekeeping, peace building continuum, and then internal exchange. So hopefully this is going to work. Okay, just a little bit of background, right? And unlike, I was very happy to participate in some of the formulation actually of the Humanitarian Data Center years ago, and been a great fan of their progress and tracking it quite closely. But maybe in contrast, right, the peace and security pillar was never set up as an instrument to be data driven. So in many ways, we have lacked a lot of the fundamentals that exist even in private sector or companies, where there are understanding of consistent measurables by which we can report success to donors. It's quite a complex system whereby we report our success, period, and have that kind of dialogue about whether we're the right instrument in all places that need support from in that peace continuum, right? But we have been challenged by our Secretary General in his data strategy of making better use of what exists already. If nothing else, the peace and security pillar in particular is a gigantic data collection factory. We're just not outfitted properly for the 21st century quite yet. But the hub is probably, when the SG announced that actually internally that he was going to formulate the strategy, of course, there's a group of us actors who feel we know how we could meet this challenge and put together the support and the concept, et cetera, to put something forward, an innovative model that attempts not only to just create a website, which is what you see, but that's just the tip of the iceberg above the ocean, right? Behind it, what we're trying to do is catalyze change internally so that we can be better partners and stand behind the data that we might be releasing in a more consistent way. So behind the sort of under the surface is just a massive amount of infrastructural change, trainings on data literacy, support for better tools at a ground level, democratization of the technological infrastructure so that we can trigger the change towards a cleaner supply chain of data that then is released according to international standards in a coherent and clean way. And we can also hold ourselves accountable if there's some kind of error that we have to correct. But that was the challenge of the data strategy is, okay, 21st century, let's learn quickly from those who've succeeded before us and sort of leapfrog a little bit faster. So as to make data discoverability itself easier and sharing easier. And maybe another sort of difference or contrast with the humanitarian sector versus peace and security pillar as a UN entity anyway, is that, there's a lot more discussion, I think, about sensitivity and what we can release and what we can't release because of the political nature of the work. And this is an attempt to kind of clear up some of those sometimes convoluted sensitivities and just make it quite clear what the rules are for participation in this data economy. So if things need to be protected, great. And if they do not have to be, we can clear that up. So the first challenge that we looked at was simply a provisioning place, which is this website, psdata.un.org. I think Branka put it in the chat, so you can click on the link there if you didn't already. What we did is we identified who really has the data. We undertook massive surveys, engaged in dialogues on a regular basis with member states and with peacekeeping missions, also special political missions, capacities in the field, as well as agencies, funds, and programs. Just gathered a ton of feedback about where the data exists, in what formats. So some of this is just simple modernization of that set of pipes that connects, far field all the way up to Security Council, and then really be clear about who are the consumers or the those that really need it. I think what I've seen as a change manager over the past years is that in the UN peace and security pillar is that oftentimes processes are created and then they lose their efficacy or they lose their purpose, but somehow they exist still and are kept alive by those who somehow are continuing to do jobs. And so it was an attempt to kind of clear that out, like old processes, let's get rid of them and be really clear about who the consumers are so that we are not overproducing without actual desire. So what is it? It's a website, it's a platform. What you see so far, I'm going to switch actually to the website itself so I can just walk through it with you for very briefly. But right now it includes data from Department of Peace Operations, Department of Peacebuilding and Political Affairs, as they have either collected it through various means, which are all documented, or from peacekeeping missions. Some of the data is private, it's login only, and it's really meant for staff members. But I think one of the things that we can pursue in the breakout rooms is feedback. Like, you tell us how we can better leverage what we have for our common interests. So it's a platform. We gathered user stories from peers across the UN, surveys, focus groups, like I said. We organized data sets. I mean, and in many ways, it was not that different than sort of reorganizing a library in a relative's house or something. There's lots of really good stuff in there. It just needs to be organized properly, put into the clean formats. And then we're leveraging the cloud platforms massively, I think, at this point, to not only sort of just have a home base for all this, fully signed off on data, but also to empower those who are collecting data, whether they kind of realize it or think through that in a coherent way or not. So as an example, right before the pandemic, I was supporting the UN mission in Colombia. And we did a couple of field visits to kind of do the assessment, and went out to sort of far field, the Amazonian region, where they have the ETCRs, which are the facilities where we're trying to work together with the FARC and the government to encourage economic transition and transformation. And we asked them how they're collecting their data, and they said it is verbally and on pen and paper. And then, once a week, they'll go back and fill out a spreadsheet, and then that'll go to a regional headquarters and go to a mission. And then somehow the mission puts together some political economic analysis of the impact of the mission, right? And that whole program, which is being done in a tripartite fashion. And so when we analyze the way that data is collected at the outset, I think that's another big pain problem that we identified even during the creation of this prototype, which is, for God's sake, if we don't give our colleagues better ways to collect the clean data or the clean water to begin with, the whole pipeline becomes, the error is introduced, and we suffer the impact of the error or the bias at every tail end down that pipe. Well, what we did do is in the course of identifying the key data sets, we identified a whole bunch of organizational problems, both technical and process, and also related to decision making. And then, though, we produced a prototype, which is this user-friendly website. I'm going to switch back to the last slide in a second, but this is the Peace and Security Data Hub, again, psdata.un.org. It's organized in a way so that you can find data, you can browse by theme, you can search. There's a how-to section if you need to understand a little bit more technically how to connect to the data via download, via API, etc. Of course, we're trying to use the most modernized techniques so that you can connect via API to the data itself, so that when it's refreshed, it auto updates whatever you're doing, including Excel, right? So if you're in Excel and you connect, the source that you connect to is on the web, and you point it straight to the API here, it will update your Excel file. You don't have to have sort of advanced technical skills just to connect in a simple way to do a simple chart and graph, although of course it enables larger approaches as well. Another section is the data stories and additional resources. I think I'm not going to walk through the entire thing, but I'll show you very quickly. For example, if you were looking for data on sustaining peace and specific to DRC, you'll find, for example, the data around the language of peace agreements, probably a key output of our mediation support unit. And when you go there, it will have a full description of exactly what it is, when it was last updated, when it goes back to. You can see a preview of it before you download it, so you can kind of confirm what it is. Each one of these have a definition, which you can look for if you don't understand the definitions of the columns. You can download via various ways or connect via API. And I think I'll just say, like, that is the site. We look forward to your feedback. If you go to the about, there's a contact, and you can contact us at any time to give us feedback. maybe the last thing I'll just say is, okay, so we put together this phase 1, phase 2, what is the challenge? And I think this is where it brings back to maybe the dialogue that we could have going forward. I think what we had aimed to do in the first bit is just clean up what we have and be responsible about it. That's the next step that I hope that this community can be inspired by or give us feedback is telling us how we can leverage what we have to build on our common interest. So if there are specific questions that we need to answer that are not about one set, it's about putting together like a prefix meal to answer the question. It's about many different sets. So for example, you know, what are the conflict drivers specific to the Horn of Africa? That is many sets. And we have data stories already on the site. And what we want to move towards as we go forward is developing, you know, data stories 2.0. It's not just about describing one data set and how it's useful for everybody, blah, blah. It's about answering questions. Like, is peacekeeping getting more dangerous? Are some of the development projects that we engage with World Bank, are they actually having the impact and targeted towards the right demographics? Are the interventions that we're introducing on the peace building side, are they well justified? Are they producing the results? Are they targeting the right demographics? Are we actually responding to climate change in the right way? These are larger questions that need evidentiary bases that answer them and in a coherent way, and we can help support that dialogue because that is what member states are asking us to. So I think, I don't know how I'm doing on time, but I think I'll end it there and maybe back over to Paige or to Veronica.
That's perfect, Christina.
Yeah.
No, that's wonderful. And I mean, really bravo to you and to the team. Anybody who's tried to work on data related issues with the UN Peace and Security Pillar will recognize this as really a major achievement, what you've done. But as you mentioned, also, it's really just the tip of the iceberg. It kind of gives us a glimpse of what could be if it could be built out to be more comprehensive and all-encompassing, more like the humanitarian data exchange. So I think, you know, really thank you for that. And thanks, Javier, also for that overview. So let's move quickly to the breakout rooms. And so for all of you who have questions, Christina and I believe Javier, we also have, I think, Caitlin from for the Center for Humanitarian Data will be in the breakout room. So you'll be able to exchange and ask questions and so forth. But why don't I ask our tech change team here to bring us back at exactly 11:40 a.m. That's Eastern time. So that gives 30 minutes for the breakout sessions. And then we'll do a very brief wrap up from those. So, so I guess we're going into the breakout rooms now. Hi, everyone. Welcome back. See everybody's joining back. So we should wrap up quickly. And I'd just like to ask maybe for really the quickest 1 to 2 minute summary of key highlights from the 3 breakout rooms. So I was in the room with Christina Goodness. That was great. And Christina, I'm happy if you want me to do it, but I'm happy for you to do it. I was taking notes.
Sure, I'll do a super quick wrap up,
Okay.
like 3 bullet points.
Right.
We discussed, you know, what are the gaps between a kind of a vision of a place, a home base for where as a collective community we can reach and access and understand the data that are informing our questions around peace building and the nexus with humanitarian. Is this a good idea? What are the gaps between reality and then? And I think some of the key things that came out were, yes, it's a good idea. It's a great concept. It has support. There are probably some challenges in understanding how we can get there, which segue neatly with the next segment, which are about capacity building, having a common understanding of who really are the decision makers that also need to tap into this ecosystem that's being built. and understanding the challenges of integrated storytelling, along with leveraging what we have. I think that is somewhat of a summary. Back to you, Paige.
Great, I'm gonna leave it at that. And why don't we turn to, we also had Magnus Oberg from Uppsala, who led one of the groups. Magnus, to you.
Okay, and very quickly, I would say that most of what we talked about had to do with sharing in various forms and with coordination. So sharing is, we had questions both about how do people share in safe ways, you know, Dropbox or Google Docs or email, or do they have more secure ways of sharing the data, and how do you protect your data? That was a big, or one of the important issues. The other with sharing has to do with not only how do we share them safely, but how do we, or what can we do to make the data more interoperable or more easy to merge and use together for people, because there's a lot of time that is spent on data cleaning and merging and things like that. And there were some suggestions for how to do that as well. And then there were a number of issues concerning coordination, ranging from the point, I think well taken, that not everyone needs to do a dashboard. It's quite expensive. It takes a lot of time, and sustaining it over time, sustaining data collection over time is a difficult thing to get funding for. So why don't we try to coordinate on that also? And there's some people suggested that we should all put our stuff in HDX and have everything in one place. Of course, HDX can help put everything in one place if everyone else has an API. So we can be in several places and also all at the same time in HDX. And then there were, they also brought up the question of coordinating collection efforts. There are oftentimes surveys made in the same area or asking similar questions, but the metadata does not show exactly what the questions that were posed in that survey was. So people go and ask the same question again. So there's a overlaps there. So we can improve our metadata and therefore coordinate our collection efforts better than we do currently. And also we should have a discussion about what kind of questions we have, because that goes before the data collection in and of itself. But the data collection should be the answer to some question. Finally, since there is so much data out there, finding your way among all the possible sources and finding that particular piece of information, the proverbial nail in the haystack, can sometimes be difficult, and we should perhaps think more about how to share information in ways that are what people want or what engages them with the data. So it was suggested, do studies about how people use the data, how they search for the data, and to try to make it more intuitively available so people find what they need. Yeah, and there were some suggestions, specifics on how we could make the data more easily accessible. You can organize it around geographical coordinates and time, and you can show everything that's available for that area, point, or time period. So I think I got most of the general points, but I missed a few. Thanks.
That's great, Magnus. And it sounds actually like you had a really excellent brainstorm there. I'm really thinking deeply about how this should be structured. So thanks very much. And last, Pavla Denisova, who's joining us from the External European Action Service. Tell us some of the highlights from your session.
Yeah, we had actually a very, very similar discussion to the previous group in many points. Our conclusion was that, yes, it would be great to have one go-to place for peacebuilding data that we currently don't have. One needs to go to different platforms. But there was also the question, would it be wise to have two different hubs, or do we want to have the peace data as a subsection of the HDX? We discussed the overlap in the data sets with the kind of humanitarian colleagues, but also the differences between the two fields. On the side of the needs and gaps, definitely a strong need to have trusted and continuously updated data sets. There was also a need to have functionality that would allow to overlay different data sets so that it is actually easily done. Broaden the data, the types of data sets we use, going beyond event data, looking at perceptions, but we also discussed some of the complications when it comes to perception data, again, having the kind of continuous data collection. One element was also raised that when it comes to social media analysis, having something that's easily accessible for the policymakers would add value. There was a need to put data always in the context that was strongly underlined. And when it comes to, last but not least, the protection of data, we discussed the fact that even peacebuilding data can be oftentimes very, very sensitive. And we had really interesting examples from Sudan and Nigeria. Thank you.
That's great. So we're going to capture all of this, by the way, and we will put it into a short summary note because I think it's really important to keep these discussions together. Let us now break. We are going to come back shortly for the next workshop on capacity building. I know our discussion already shaded into discussions around capacities and data literacy and data storytelling and so forth. So we're going to work on that a bit more in the next session. I hope you can join us again. Thanks very much to Christina, to Javier, and also to our breakout room moderators, Magnus and Pavla, and look forward to seeing you again soon. Thanks.